Hello, everybody. This is Stephen Whitfield with Drilling Contractor, and we're pleased to be joined today by Samantha McCulloch, Chief Executive of Australian Energy Producers, an industry organization that represents the interest of energy producers in Australia. We're going to be talking a little bit about the industry going on in the region and see what's happening there. So, Samantha, thank you so much for joining us today.
Stephen, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
So I refer to an entity that now has a new name, Australian Energy Producers. You guys were formerly the Australian Petroleum Production and Exploration Association. That name change is fairly recent. Can you explain a little bit about what went behind that name change?
Yeah, sure. So indeed, we were the Australian Petroleum Production and Exploration Association for almost 60 years. So certainly this was a name that held us in good stead for decades. But really, when we looked at the role of our industry today, the role of our industry in the future, it's actually broader in terms of course, exploring and producing oil and gas, but also our industry is really key to, net zero technologies like carbon capture and storage. It's key to supporting the investment and deployment of low emission fuels like hydrogen. And so we wanted to have a name that reflected that broader role of the industry. And that's why we chose Australian Energy Producers.
Okay, so let's get into some questions about the industry at large. What do you see as some of the biggest challenges facing the drilling industry today? And how do you see organizations like Australian Energy Producers are helping in addressing those challenges?
Certainly, it's a challenging environment as we transform our global energy systems to net zero. For the Australian Energy Producers, we have committed to net zero, and we see enormous opportunities actually in terms of the role of natural gas in particular on that transformation. That includes, gas partnering with renewables to firm power and provide reliable electricity, in our case, to Australian homes and businesses. It includes the important role of gas in particular in terms of supporting manufacturing and new industrial opportunities. So in Australia, we talk a lot about critical minerals processing and the opportunities associated with that. And gas can be a key partner there. Also carbon capture and storage technologies, low emission hydrogen. So the industry has a really good story to tell when we're looking at the role of oil and gas in terms of net zero pathways. But there are indeed challenges about really communicating that role, that long-term role of our industry in the cleaner energy future, and also ensuring that we have policy settings and stable policy settings that can attract the investment that we need for new energy supply so that gas can actually fulfill that role that we need it to play in a net zero pathway.
One of the big things that's going on right now is carbon capture and storage, and that seems to be a huge part of Australia's decarbonization efforts right now. You guys have one of the largest CCS projects in the world right now, Gorgon, and the government announced new offshore greenhouse gas storage permits last year. So it seems to be such a big thing right now in your country. What are some of the obstacles that you see for scaling up Australia's CCS capacity?
Yeah, well, Stephen, I think what we're seeing is actually huge global momentum around carbon capture and storage technology here in Australia, but also in the US, Canada, Europe. Australia is very fortunate to have all the ingredients to be a leader in CCS. We have excellent geology. We have the skills and expertise of the oil and gas industry. We have mature regulatory frameworks. Perhaps where the challenges arise for us is we don't necessarily have the policy settings for CCS that are akin to what we see in the US, where there's huge support through the IRA 45Q tax credits that are really promoting huge investment in these technologies. So while we're seeing a lot of progress around projects, indeed, Australia is home to one of the largest CO2 storage projects in the world. Australia's still got a way to go in terms of some of the policy settings to really capture the full opportunity that we have for CCS.
It's funny that you mentioned policy settings because I have a question about government and regulation. So what are the challenges that you think the industry sort of faces in collaborating with government and regulatory entities? And what do you think are the best ways to address those challenges?
Yeah. Well, look, here in Australia, our industry has invested around $400 billion into the economy over the last decade or so. These are huge investments. They need policy certainty and stability. And so, working with governments and Australian energy producers as an organisation are actively engaged with governments and regulators to ensure that stability, to support the new wave of investment that we need in oil and gas to be able to provide that secure energy supply for the net zero transition.
And lastly, earlier this year, you said in a speech how the industry's role in the community is misunderstood, and how it's important for us to not just talk amongst ourselves. And it seems to be a big topic among industry circles right now. We need to not talk amongst ourselves about our work. So what do you think the industry can do better to educate the public about exactly what it does?
It's certainly a challenge, but we have an excellent story to tell. Again, as an industry here in Australia, we've committed to net zero. We see ourselves as being key enablers of that net zero pathway. But actually, many in the community don't appreciate the current role of gas in their lives today. People associate it here with their stoves at home, with home heating, but actually it powers about 40% of our manufacturing sector, plays a broader role in terms of electricity generation. So communicating those benefits to the broader community, we think is really important. So that's one part of that equation, but also as an industry, we're really focused on working with other industries to support not just energy security and the economic benefits associated with our sector, but emissions reductions. And that includes through carbon capture and storage technologies. Right now, we've been doing some work with our chief science organisation, the CSIRO, looking at how it can support regional decarbonisation, working with other sectors, opportunities for CCS, opportunities for low carbon hydrogen, firmed renewables, natural gas, to support broader decarbonisation efforts across various sectors. And so this is another way that the industry can be working, with other parts of the economy to support the decarbonisation pathway.
Well, Sam, thank you so much for taking the time to tell us a little bit about what's going on in Australia and sort of your wider thoughts on the global industry. And we appreciate you taking the time. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me.
And thank you for visiting Drilling Contractor.